Okay, some quick comments on what's going to be a wild week in markets. I had thought President Trump would find an off ramp last week. He did not, which is highly concerning, frankly. There doesn't seem to be any point to further bombing Iran. We're not going to get the enriched uranium. We're not going to do some thriller movie special forces thing and dig under, piles of rubble and get that stuff. Not happening. We're not going to tip the regime over. Even the Israelis have now publicly acknowledged this. So either President Trump is getting bad intelligence on that, or not believing the intelligence he's getting and continuing in pursuit of those fantasy objectives, or there's another dynamic at play, which is sort of equally dangerous, which is that it's not about upside at this point. It's about limiting the downside, finding an exit that's not too politically damaging. And unfortunately for the president, I think things only get worse in that regard. And this was the reason I thought he would get out by now. There was a window a week or so ago, and I think he sensed that with his comments last Monday saying things were almost over, where he could have said, we've met our limited objectives and just gotten the hell out. And I think that window is now closed on him. I do think he wanted to exit early last week, and then we had really bad press coverage of Iran hitting the oil depot in Oman, and they hit a couple of tankers that were shown to be in flames. And perhaps the president just thought this isn't a great backdrop to declaring victory and getting out. But again, he's on a very slippery slope now. I do think that the Truth Social posts yesterday about this request for international partners to transverse the strait is in search of an off ramp. I'm not sure anybody's going to take him up on that. But I think what he's thinking is he needs that sort of show of U.S. force and resolve, and then he can declare victory against that backdrop. But this is all very tricky. A solution here may require the Iraqis allowing him a moment like that so he can exit gracefully. And I'm sure many watching this will think that sounds insane because, at least in the social media space, the vast majority of commentators seem to think Iran wants this war to continue. I just don't see the logic in that. A power like the United States is not going to be defeated by Iran. The North Vietnamese didn't defeat the U.S. They fended them off and we left. So if we're basically acknowledging you fended us off and we're going to leave, that's the best Iran can do. They're not getting reparations. They're not getting security guarantees. These things are fantasy that would probably assure the destruction of their entire civilian infrastructure and put them in a situation of economic despair from which they probably couldn't climb out. So I think Iran is in a good position to declare victory themselves. The IRGC probably come out of this, if it ends in the next week, in better shape domestically than they were before the war. Recall, they were on the verge of hyperinflation in Iran. Who knows how many demonstrators they had to kill to keep society from tearing itself apart. But there's only so much damage that they can allow to be done and expect to dig out of that. I think they want this over. So I go into next week long U.S. Treasuries. Just said this last week, I'm down about a point on the 10-year, giving that trade wide berth because if this continues, it is contractionary, not inflationary. And I'm long S&P calls. Tried that last week, expired worthless. I'm doing it again this week because the logic of this on both sides is there's just no sense for it to continue. The reason I'm long 10-year notes and calls is that if I'm wrong, I think I'm going to be very wrong. If Trump does something crazy like tries to take Karg Island or the Iranians push back hard on any peace outreach, we're going to $150 oil. Bond market's not going to sell off on that because the equity market's going to be down hard. We're talking a 6 to 8% down day in equities if something goes wrong here. And then the market's going to realize that this is not inflationary. This is not only going to be an oil shock, it's going to be a confidence shock. And we're talking about potentially the end of the entire Trump agenda and, 2+ years of a governance shit show in the U.S. That's a recessionary scenario. So unless we're in one of these really crazy dynamics where neither side can manage to get done what is in its best interest, I think the tail, which the market is very worried about, will not come to pass. At some point this week, we'll at least be able to see the outlines of an exit to this crisis.